You've heard this your whole life. Read your Bible. So you open it. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and somewhere around the third chapter of laws about animal sacrifices and unclean food, you close it. Not because you stopped believing, because it felt like a stranger's diary, full of names you can't pronounce, wars you don't understand, rules that seem to have nothing to do with your life, your rent, your broken relationship, your 2 a.m. anxiety. And quietly, maybe you've never said this out loud, you started to wonder, is God actually in all of this? Or am I missing something? Here's what nobody told you. The Bible is not 66 separate books. It is one story, one unbroken thread, running from the first word of Genesis all the way to the last breath of Revelation. And that thread has a name. Every book points to it. Every prophet whispers it. Every law, every war, every psalm of desperation, written at 2 a.m. by a king who had everything. All of it is moving toward one thing. When you see it, you won't read the Bible the same way again. In the next 40 minutes, we're going to walk through all 66 books of the Bible together. Not as a religion class, as a rescue story. Your rescue story. Most people think the Bible is a rule book. Do this, don't do that. Be good, pray more, try harder. And if you mess up, God is disappointed. That's the version most of us grew up with. The God who's keeping score. The God who turns away when you fall. The God who blessed the people who had it together and judged everyone else. So we read the Bible like a test we're always failing. Or we don't read it at all. But here's what's strange. Open Genesis. The very first book. The very first humans God creates. They fail. Immediately. Catastrophically. And God doesn't walk away. He goes looking for them. Where are you? That's the first question God asks in the Bible. Not how could you? Not you're done. Not silence. Where are you? Open Revelation. The very last book. After every war, every judgment, every beast and plague, and broken empire, God moves toward humanity again. Behold, I make all things new. Same God. First page. Last page. Still moving toward people who ran. So if the Bible isn't a rule book, what is it? And why does every single book, from the oldest law to the newest letter, keep telling the same story over and over again? About a God who refuses to let go. Here's what I want you to see today. There is a pattern running through every single book of the Bible. Not hidden in complicated theology. Not buried in Greek manuscripts that only scholars can access. Right there, on the surface. Does God actually show up when everything falls apart? Stories about people who had it together. These are stories about people who were drowning, and what happened when God entered the water. By the end of this video, you're going to see the Bible not as a collection of ancient stories, but as a living map. A map that leads directly to where you are standing right now. Every book, one thread. Let's follow it. Before we open the first page, you need to understand what you're holding. The Bible was written over approximately 1,500 years. 40 different authors. 3 different languages. Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek. Written on 3 different continents. Asia, Africa, Europe. Shepherds wrote parts of it. Kings wrote parts of it. A tax collector, a fisherman, a doctor, a prisoner. Some of them never met each other. Some of them were separated by 700 years. And yet, read it straight through, and it tells one story, with one heartbeat. That doesn't happen by accident. Now, the world these writers lived in was not peaceful. It was brutal. Empires rose and crushed everything in their path. Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. Nations were swallowed whole.
People were dragged from their homes in chains. Temples burned to the ground. Children grew up in exile, speaking a foreign language, wondering if God had forgotten them. These writers weren't sitting in comfortable rooms with good lighting and plenty of time. They were writing in the middle of collapse. Some of them were weeping when they wrote. You can feel it in the ink. And the people who first received these words, they weren't reading for academic interest. They were reading because they needed to know if God was still there, if he still remembered them, if any of this meant anything. Sound familiar? That's the context. Not ancient history locked behind glass in a museum. A people desperate for God, writing, praying, crying, waiting. And what they found. Now let's walk through it. All of it. Beginning at the beginning. Genesis. The first word in Hebrew is Bereshit. In the beginning. Not once upon a time. Not long ago in a land far away. In the beginning. Which means this is where everything starts. Including you. God speaks. Light appears. Land rises from water. Stars ignite. Animals fill the earth. And then something different happens. God doesn't speak humanity into existence. He forms us. Like a potter with clay. Hands in the dirt. Close. Personal. Deliberate. Then he breathes into us. His own breath. Into human lungs. That detail matters. Remember it. And everything is good. The word in Hebrew, tov. Not just fine. Not just acceptable. Good in the way a father looks at something he made with his hands and feels something in his chest. Then the fall. Adam and Eve in the garden. The serpent. The fruit. The choice. And here is where most people think the story becomes about punishment. But read it again, slowly. After they eat the fruit, they hide. They cover themselves with leaves. They hear God walking in the garden, and they run. And God calls out, "Where are you?"
He knows where they are. He's God. This isn't a search party. This is an invitation. Come out. Don't hide from me. Not even now. They confess. Consequences follow. Real ones. Painful ones. The ground becomes hard. Childbirth becomes agony. Death enters the story. But before they leave the garden, God makes them clothing. With his own hands. He covers them. The same God who breathed life into their lungs now covers the shame they created. First sin in the Bible. First act that follows it. God moving toward the broken. Not away. That's the pattern. We've only read 3 chapters. It's already there. Fast forward. Exodus. The Israelites have been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Not 40. Not 4. 400 years. Generations of children born into chains. Backs bent under the sun. Babies thrown into the Nile. A whole people ground down so completely that they stopped believing rescue was even possible. And then the text says something that stops you cold. God heard their groaning. That's it. That's the trigger. Not a military uprising, not a political movement, not a brilliant strategy. They cried out, and God heard. He appears to Moses in a burning bush, middle of the desert. Moses is 80 years old, hiding from his past, tending sheep that aren't even his. Not exactly the profile of a revolutionary leader. God speaks from the fire. And what does he say? I have seen the misery of my people. I have heard them crying. I know their suffering. And I have come down. 4 verbs. Seen, heard, known, come down. This is not a distant God, issuing orders from a throne. This is a God who looked at 400 years of suffering and said, I've been watching. I've been counting every tear. And now I'm moving. What follows is 10 plagues that dismantle the most powerful empire on earth. The Red Sea splits. A nation of slaves walks out on dry ground.
But here's what gets missed in the spectacle. Before any plague, before any miracle, God's first move was simply to show up and say, "I see you." Same pattern, different century. Genesis, humanity breaks. God moves toward them and covers their shame. Exodus, a people cry out from the bottom of 400 years of darkness. God descends. You are starting to feel it now, aren't you? This isn't coincidence. This is character. David is the man the Bible calls a man after God's own heart, the greatest king Israel ever had, the one God chose personally, the one who killed Goliath with a sling and a stone, while trained soldiers stood paralyzed with fear. The Psalms he wrote are still being prayed by people in hospital beds at 3 a.m. And David committed adultery.
Then tried to cover the whole thing up. This isn't a small moral failing. This is calculated, cold. A king using his power to destroy an innocent man and take his wife. If this were any other story, David is done, finished, discarded. But a prophet named Nathan walks into the palace, sits down across from the most powerful man in the country, and tells him a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. David's face goes red. His fist hits the table. That man deserves to die. Nathan doesn't flinch. You are the man. Silence in the throne room. And David, this king, this warrior, this man with every reason to have Nathan executed on the spot, breaks. I have sinned against the Lord. 7 words. No excuses. No deflection. And God's response through Nathan, the Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. Not after a year of penance. Not after David rebuilt his reputation. Not after he earned it back. Immediately. The consequences still came. They were devastating. His family fractured. His son would later try to take his throne. Heartbreak followed him, the rest of his life. But the relationship was not broken. Genesis, God covers the broken. Exodus, God descends to the suffering. Samuel, God restores the guilty. 3 books. 3 completely different situations. 3 completely different kinds of human failure. 1 response. And we haven't even reached the prophets yet. What's coming next will change how you read the entire second half of the Bible. Stop here for a moment. Because what we've been seeing on the surface, God pursuing, God descending, God restoring, has a name buried in the original Hebrew. 1 word, Hesed. You won't find a perfect English translation for it. Bible translators have tried. Loving kindness, steadfast love, unfailing mercy, loyal love. None of them fully capture it. Because Hesed isn't just an emotion. It's a covenant word. It describes the kind of love that doesn't leave when the other person breaks the agreement. The kind of love that stays when it has every legal, moral, and relational right to walk away. In ancient Near Eastern culture, covenants were everything. Breaking one was catastrophic. The consequences were binding, permanent. Hesed is what happens when one party breaks the covenant, and the other party absorbs the cost and stays anyway. That word appears in the Old Testament, 247. It appears in Genesis. It appears in Exodus. It appears in the darkest psalm David ever wrote. Through the middle of Lamentations, a book written sitting in the ashes of a burned city. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. Jeremiah wrote that line surrounded by rubble, not from a comfortable distance, not looking back from safety, from inside the wreckage.
Hesed is not a feeling God has on good days. It is his nature, his character, the thing he cannot stop being, even when we give him every reason to. Every book we've walked through, Genesis to Lamentations, is just Hesed wearing different clothing. And now, everything connects. Here it is, the thread we've been following through every book. From the garden, where God covered two people drowning in shame, to the burning bush, where he descended into 400 years of slavery, to the throne room, where he met a murderous king with mercy instead of judgment, to the ashes of Jerusalem, where Jeremiah found Hesed, still burning through the rubble. Every single book of the Bible, all 66, is telling you one thing: God moves toward what is broken. And it doesn't stop in the Old Testament. It becomes a person. The New Testament opens with a genealogy in Matthew that most people skip. But read the names carefully. Rahab, a prostitute. Ruth, a foreign widow. Bathsheba, a woman caught in David's sin. Manasseh, one of the most wicked kings in Israel's history. God didn't scrub the family line clean before Jesus entered it. He walked straight through the broken middle of it. Then Jesus himself, 30 years of silence, 3 years of ministry. And everywhere he goes, he moves toward what everyone else moves away from. Lepers, tax collectors, prostitutes, demon-possessed men living in tombs. A woman who had been bleeding for 12 years and hadn't been touched by another human being in over a decade. He touches them first. Before he heals them, he touches them. And then the cross. The moment where Hesed reaches its furthest point, where God in human flesh absorbs every consequence of every broken covenant in human history, and stays. Father, forgive them. From the cross. While it was still happening. This is not a God who waits for you to get better before he comes close. This is a God who enters the worst moment and calls it the beginning. 66 books. One heartbeat. I am coming toward you. So let me ask you something. What are you hiding from right now? Maybe it's not dramatic. Maybe there's no single catastrophic moment. Just a slow, quiet drift. Weeks of not praying. Months of going through the motions. A version of yourself you don't recognize anymore. Sitting in a church pew or scrolling past Bible verses. Wondering if God still sees you specifically. Not humanity in general. You. Here's what 66 books just told you. He does. He saw Adam hiding behind leaves. He heard 400 years of groaning in Egypt. He walked into David's throne room after the worst thing David ever did. He sat with Jeremiah in the ashes. He touched the untouchable. He entered a tomb and walked out. He has never once turned away from a person who was broken. Not once. In the entire Bible. That's not a streak he's about to break with you. So whatever you're carrying right now, the guilt, the exhaustion, the quiet shame you haven't said out loud to anyone, bring it. Not when you're better. Not when you fixed it. Now. Because the first question God ever asked in Scripture is still the question he's asking you today. Where are you? Not in anger. In invitation. The Bible is 1,500 years of the same God, saying the same thing, in 66 different ways. I have not forgotten you. I am still coming. Come out. Don't hide from me. Not even now.